All right, well, let's get started because we don't have a whole lot of time to begin with, and we want to get into this, and we've timed it pretty closely. So Kendra Mon and I are going to be doing segments for the organization. We've got a couple of other committee people on, Ann Krita and Laura Brown, so they may pop in on something, but here we go. The campaign is kind of an ongoing on-the-job training in conflict resolution and transformation, which is kind of the theme of this weekend for Peace Action. And I'm going to go over just a brief overview of the legislation and the campaign, history of this in our country, and then we're going to have an exercise on the connection process by Kendra, which is a way that we get connected into our heart space before we do some advocacy. And then we're going to do a role play in advocacy to kind of demystify legislative advocacy for people who haven't done it yet or haven't done it for a while. So it's actually a pretty exhilarating experience the first time you do it. And it doesn't, you don't have to be an expert. You're impressing your member of Congress or their staff just by taking the time out of our busy lives to say, this is important to me and this is why, and please support it to the best of your ability. Okay, so the legislation and ultimately the federal department addresses all of the social justice issues that are in need of ongoing incremental change. So I think everybody here today knows that there's just not one quick fix to fix our society, that we need to be doing something every year and every decade to put things in a better place for everybody, to continue to form that more perfect union. And that's exactly why we're asking for a Department of Federal Infrastructure to create a lasting peace, to just continually address things and improve them as the opportunity and the consciousness of the country provides. So we're going to talk about kind of an advocacy sandwich where we prepare for a meeting or a call, and that includes the connection process that we'll be experiencing shortly, to meet with a member of Congress and make an ask, and then do a follow-up, a debriefing if possible, and a follow-up. And so all of the things that we're covering are covered in much more detail in documents and podcasts, and the Peace Action is going to send a handout to people who are in the workshop that has links to all those on the Peace Alliance website. So example, the exercise that we're going to do in about 20 minutes, we have a full 1-hour training session on it. So we're going to do an abbreviated version. Hello, welcome to the workshop.
Excuse me?
Welcome to the workshop. We're in the Department of Peacebuilding campaign workshop.
Well, I mean, it's on US 74 North Evergreen.
You may have a wrong.
US 74th North Evergreen.
We're on a Zoom call.
Hey,
and having.
Richard, I think you're not muted.
Oh, I see. I just muted him. Okay. I didn't get that. How was that happening? Okay, so we've got still people coming in on the call as well. Okay. All right, so lots of support documents on the website. And in essence, we will have a Department of Peace when enough people ask for it. So that's where we'll go through a little bit of background about what the Department of Peace legislation is and how it came into being. And then we're going to get into the asking exercise, because that's the important part of our work together. So this idea of a Department or Office of Peace or a plan for peace has been around as long as our country was forming in the late 1700s. Back then, George Washington thought, well, a good plan for peace is a strong militia. And so we've been going in that direction for over 200 years. And I think we see the signs that there's a better way. And so we're still in the process of formulating that better way. And I think that infrastructure for peace building in the United States, and it's happening in other countries as we speak as well, is a good entryway there. So the first piece of legislation with this idea was in 1938. And the current legislation was first introduced on July 11 of 2001, and it has been in every session of Congress ever since. So it is a very comprehensive piece of legislation with a number of undersecretaries addressing all the different aspects of the society that have a bearing in why we have violence in our country and world, and where we can make progress in reducing that and creating more peace. Okay, so the Peace Alliance was formed just a couple of years after the legislation was introduced in order to support the emergence of a grassroots campaign. And in 2011, we formed the Department of Peacebuilding committee as part of the Peace Alliance to focus on the legislation as the Peace Alliance was expanding the legislation it supported and finding other initiatives, et cetera, to make sure that somebody always had their eyes on keeping this moving forward. And so the elements of the campaign haven't changed since the early days. It's legislative advocacy, being the change or the peace that we wish to see in the world, as we're advocating for federal infrastructure that will support a sustainable peace over time. And then the importance of telling a brief personal story, or what our personal connection is to the legislation, why it's important to us, because that makes an impression on our members of Congress. Not everybody goes to see them, and they want to know why. Why is this important to us? And then we've always had a sample meeting agenda for a member of Congress, and again, that's on the website. We're gonna, for brevity, just kind of wing it a little bit with a little instruction today, but we do have more support materials for people who like to be very prepared. And we in the campaign have established some annual action times where we promote advocacy. So we've got more people at the same time talking to their members of Congress. Examples are Season for Nonviolence at the beginning of the year, Peace Wants a Piece of the Pie around Mother's Day, and we often have a summer initiative and then advocacy days around International Day of Peace in September. We've also included different types of nonviolence and peace building trainings as part of our conferences and communications with people. Center for Nonviolent Communication was one of the first ones that the Peace Alliance advocated for. The connection practice is something that Kendra will go into a little bit of the background in a minute while we do that exercise, but we've got a couple of other places where people can get into other trainings that are very useful, and that will be on that handout that will be coming from Peace Action as well. And also just wanted to mention that the King philosophy on nonviolence and the beloved community, we use that a lot in our campaign committee to kind of center us in being the peace as we're advocating for it, because certainly conflicts always arise. As they say, conflict is inevitable, violence is not. Okay, so Kendra, would you like to take us into the connection practice?
I remembered to unmute.
Yay! First be heard.
Yeah. So the connection practice was created by Rita Marie Johnson. And what she did was to combine nonviolent communication with heart math to create a connection practice and establish training programs, starting in Costa Rican schools and spreading around the world. So starting with nonviolent communication, or NVC, that was founded by Marshall Rosenberg, and it fosters connection by acknowledging our own feelings and underlying needs, while also respecting the feelings and needs of others without the violence of shame, blame, judgment, or guilt that Chelsea talked about in our communication. And heart mass, the other piece that she brought into it, is about bringing your physical, mental, and emotional systems into coherent alignment so that we begin to experience increased access to our heart's intuitive guidance. Heart math actually proved and built upon the current biological proof that the heart has its own intelligence and it's part and connected to our brain. It's part of our brain. So by bringing the two systems together, Rita Marie created a social emotional learning experience that focuses on connecting to your heart so you can learn to ask yourself questions for the answers that bubble up from your deepest self. So Rita Marie Johnson established the Razur Foundation to promote teaching and use of the connection practice. Then in 2006, the foundation initiated a bill for a Ministry of Peace to be integrated into the Ministry of Justice in Costa Rica. And the story that Rita Marie tells is that she used the connection practice herself in conversations with government officials, and that apparently impressed them. And so a bill was passed in 2009 to create a Ministry for Justice and Peace. And this success culminated in the summit of the Global Alliance for Ministries and Departments for Peace in 2009. That summit was hosted by the Costa Rican government and facilitated by the Razur Foundation. And we maintain that connection with the Global Alliance for Ministries and Departments of Peace. And that work continues to spread around the world, and in the UN, the idea is spreading. So, and I myself am secretary of the board of GAMIP, the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures of Peace. So that's an important organization. A few years ago, at our annual Advocacy Days training in DC, sponsored by the National Department of Peacebuilding Committee, we were fortunate to receive a workshop in the connection practice and adopted its use at the beginning of each meeting and before we go into a meeting at a congressional office to help us be heartful and mindful in fostering connection at the meeting. So I'd like to invite you now to join me in a bit of a connection practice. And so I invite you to close your eyes, sit up straight, and pull your head back over your shoulders. And start deep, slow breathing. And as you take those deep, slow breaths, imagine that your heart is the origin for both of those things, that you breathe out through your heart and you breathe in through your heart. This is for, continue, this is for warming your hearts and wisdom, and slowly relaxing your body at the same time, relaxing your mind, and bringing yourself into coherence. Each of our cells is part of our brain wisdom. And with each incoming breath, we give fuel to the fire that each cell needs to burn to give us that energy. And I'm imagining therefore I invite you to imagine as well that you are lighting up from within. Cell by cell, with the heart fueling that, and the breath fueling that. So in effect, become a cell tower. Beaming out love to one another and our surrounding area. And together, we'll light up the world with love and peace and connection. And I invite you to bring that back into the room as we continue our workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. Just thought before we move on, if anybody who has done this for the first time or had a significant experience, does anyone want to share from this exercise? I think you can just unmute yourself and speak. We've got a relatively small group here. Okay, I just wanted to leave that space for it. So I just want to say briefly, you know, as we're part of the national committee and the campaign for the grassroots advocacy for the Department of Peace, that we don't necessarily have this all down perfectly, but this is an important tool that we use to kind of get into our heart space. The training that they offer for connection process is like a weekend training. So obviously you have a different experience than we we're fortunate to have them come to one of our advocacy days in DC and give us an abbreviated 3-hour workshop that talks about getting in touch with what brings you joy and bringing that to mind as well. But just, you know, opening up your heart can cause you to have a different kind of meeting with your members of Congress. So what we started doing is we have an expanded exercise at the hotel before we left for the Hill. And then we'd meet up a couple of minutes before our appointment time outside of a member of Congress's office and just take another minute to reconnect and get in touch with that connection energy before a meeting. And we've found it, interestingly enough, having different outcomes of the meeting. So it does make a difference. And the staffers and the members of Congress seem to really enjoy the energy that we bring into the room around peace building as we're asking them to advocate more for peace building as well. Now let's get into the asking for it exercise, okay? So this is a bit of a role play, and I know some people love role plays, some people hate them, but we're gonna just try doing this just to kind of demonstrate there's no wrong way to do this. Whether you like to wing it or be over prepared, we're just going to do this very briefly today just to get an experience of it and to debrief about it. So we'll need 3 volunteers at least or more, 1 to be the member of Congress role and 1 or 2 people to be grassroots advocate role people. So do we have any volunteers? You can raise your hand or just say hello. What you'd like to volunteer for.
I'll be a member of Congress.
Hey, that's Jamie. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jamie. All right. Who would like to meet with Jamie today and ask her to support the Department of Peacebuilding legislation? Just one other person, and I'll go through a brief excuse me, meeting agenda. So we're not going to just throw you in there cold, but we'll just go over what you might say. And then it's just a couple minutes exercise. If we have time, we'll do 2 versions of it. Just need 1 person. It'd be nice to have a new person to just try it out, just so you can see that it's not really as scary as it seems like it would be. But if we've got somebody that has done it before that'd like to volunteer, we'll accept that too. Why don't I go over a brief sample agenda while people are mulling it over, okay? So what we normally do is we'll do a brief introduction. Once we get into the room, we say hello, thanks for meeting with us. I am Karen Johnson, and this is why a Department of Peacebuilding is important to me. I come from here and so forth. And usually you're meeting with somebody that, you know, is your representative, so they're familiar with your geographic district, so try to have a connection to the district at home. And then you ask the aide what brought them to their work. You want to see what's important to them. And if there's something in what they say that ties into a portion of the bill, or some kind of importance around peace building or violence reduction, then we try to tie in things with that. And then we have documents that we give to the members of Congress when we're meeting in person, key highlights, organizational endorsers, and other things that we can give them in their packets. They usually like to pull up the bill themselves off of the congressional website. And then we ask them, you know, if it's clear that they've already read the bill, sometimes they have, then we'll ask them if they can talk to the member of Congress, or whether they're ready to be a co-sponsor. And sometimes we ask them if they have suggestions for us to make progress in the campaign, or other members of Congress that they think would be more inclined to co-sponsor than others. And then we, you know, thank them for the meeting, and we leave, and then we follow up in whatever amount of time we said. Is it okay if we send you an email in a week or 2 and see what they say? So with that brief overview, does anybody like to be the grassroots advocate now? No. How about Laura? Would you like to step in for that?
Yeah, I can. I didn't take the notes, but on what you said, so I might need a little coaching, but I'll go into the fire.
Okay. So I'll be an advocate with you. So if something, I can always jump in.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's start.
Yep. So my name is Laura Brown, and thank you for agreeing to meet with us. And I live in northwestern Pennsylvania, which is otherwise known as the Pennsylvania Wilds. And I'm forgetting what I'm supposed to say next. I would just, thank you for reading the email and getting back to us and scheduling the meeting. And I hope you had some time to look over the material about the Department of Peacebuilding and how you might be interested in being a co-sponsor of the legislation. And right now, we'd just like to know a little bit more about you and what brought you to the important work that you do and how that might be linked into a Department of Peacebuilding.
Hi, sorry. Laura, nice to meet you. My name is Jamie Wood. I'm an aide with the House of Representatives. Right now, we are interested in meeting with you because we would like to know the benefits of starting a Department of Peace. I understand that your group is very passionate about it and things like that. The Congress member wants to know what benefits and how do we get this started in legislation. Also, the cabinet position being created. How do we market this is what I'm trying to say to the voters.
Yep, those
Do you
are
have
all
ideas?
Those are all really great questions, and those are things that there's information about that's available through our website and different sources, and we certainly are working on all those things and advancing those things forward as a Department of Peacebuilding committee. And thank you so much for your overwhelming response and support. And we have someone on the committee is working on some economic benefits that articulate some of the economic benefits of investing in peace as opposed to investing in war. And Karen, do you have some more reference material available right now on the benefits?
Yeah, I would just say generally, the big benefit of bringing this into being is it sends a message to our citizens and to everybody in the world that we're making peace a priority. And that's a big shift for the United States. A lot of people don't realize that people in other countries see us as a war country, that often that's their citizens' only experience of us is when we come there for some type of armed conflict, and we don't realize how many countries we have troops in for different reasons. So that's a big benefit, overall benefit. But with all of the social unrest right now, it also, there are different aspects of the bill that deal with, institutional racism now and violence in our systems and so forth. And it puts somebody in charge of saying, what's the next area for improvement in all of these aspects of our government and society. And it creates a grant program for local communities to apply for funds to address the areas of violence in their communities, and tapping into programs that have been proven in cities around the country and expanding that. So it really gives a message to the people that our government is going to start working for us in the best way that it can. And I would say that's the biggest overall benefit, and that we can help work with you on how to market this to voters in a more meaningful way and so forth. But the cabinet position, again, is so that we've got a voice with somebody with peace building and nonviolent action at the table as conflicts arise and situations arise at the cabinet level, to be able to offer alternatives to what we now have are mostly meeting violence with violence, which is both costly financially and on a human level. So we'll have less cleanup from conflicts when we have somebody there that can offer some other alternatives and possibilities and create new ones in the moment for each situation that arises, whether it's domestic or international.
Yeah, and this is, oops, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And we start by, your member of Congress becoming a co-sponsor and hopefully a champion, so that we could start, getting a hearing for this and moving it forward. It's been in existence in recent history for 20 years, and it just feels like it's time for it to move forward with all that people are calling for right now in the way of justice and social equity.
Thank you both. I can talk to Laura, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say that to put it in some economic perspective, the Department of Defense, I believe, now gets funded at like $1 trillion a year or close to it. And the Department of Defense is the largest employer in the United States. So that says a lot about maybe how out of balance things have become. And so the next step, as Karen said, would be to co-sponsor, become one of our co-sponsors. And there's a process, an easy process to get signed up as a co-sponsor. So would your representative be interested in becoming a co-sponsor?
I think my congressional member would be very interested. I think selling it on that a Department of Peace would also bring a new face for the United States after so many years of militarization of peace on a new changing international stage. And I definitely think a domestic point of view of pointing out how much we spend on wars and that, and looking for alternatives instead of war, is definitely something my congressional member would be interested in. So I can set up an appointment.
Wow, that sounds great.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Music to our ears.
That's obviously idealistic, right?
Yeah.
Because if I were in Congress, I definitely would be a co-sponsor.
That's wonderful. We do have people who respond very positively, and then I've also experienced people who just don't even call you back. So so it's always great to get a positive response.
Yeah, and so we would just end the meeting with, so what would be a reasonable time for us to follow up with you, in 1 week or 2 weeks, or?
1 week. Would be
Okay,
good.
all right, so we
Excellent.
have our ask and our follow-up time. And so now, do we want to do a little bit of a debriefing on how that felt to be in the meeting?
Sure. Did you want me to go first?
Let's let Jamie go first.
Okay.
It looks like her screen might be locked up. Yeah. Okay, Laura, why don't you go while we're
Why
seeing
all this
Oh, there-
marketing
there we go.
and stuff like, oh,
She's back.
sorry. Oh,
That's
so
okay. The
sorry.
screen was locked up for a little bit, so we didn't hear you.
Oh, every time I start talking. I was saying that I was trying to put myself in the shoes. I know politicians, that's the first concern is how do I sell it? Oh, did it freeze again?
No,
And
okay.
oh, okay. And so that was the thing. I know they think about voters and how can they sell this idea before they sign up to it. So that I think that was a really cool experiment.
And Jamie, I think you should run for Congress and we'll vote for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's another way of getting more co-sponsors. People in the campaign running for office.
I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you did a great job, Jamie. And some of the questions that you asked would be or included like in any kind of correspondence that we would do with you. So before the meeting, there is a list, like a short list of, it kind of addresses what you're saying about how can this be sold, and just, you know, briefly describes the legislation and kind of gives you an overview of the key points and how it helps internationally and domestically and even down at the school level as we bring up new, you know, the next generation of children and young adults to be more peace building and loving, kind, compassionate people in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we, depending on what comes up, we can add other documents or whatever in the follow-up email. So yeah, great job. And anybody else listening in have any thoughts or comments or questions arising from the role play?
Jamie was responsive as far as her response, her thoughts about the ask, but we didn't do that part of either thanking the Congress member for legislation that they've already done that's related to the Department of Peacebuilding, or asking Jamie how she came to be in that position.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we kind of shortened the process a little bit.
Yeah, but those are good points, Kendra, that we often will do a little research on the representative first to see what kind of legislation they've brought forth that have that relate to something in the Department of Peacebuilding bill so that we can show that it's right up their alley with what they're supporting on a smaller scale. Then this would take it up to a larger scale. And yeah, and we didn't really want to put Jamie on the spot because she's not really a staffer.
Yeah.
So to have to think of why she's in the position that she is, but that also again gives us good information and forms a connection with the staffer if we know what it is that brought them to their line of work and what their thoughts are, because often a lot of them come through peace interest or some kind of international interest and so forth that really relate directly to the bill. Okay, anybody else like to say anything about?
Yes,
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I work with Anne in her department there, but as a Canadian, we do things a little different. And I did think that, you know, the interchange went very well. I like, Kendra, the idea of structuring it around NVC, you know, that kind of nonviolent communication aspect. And often wonder when we're making an appeal, what kind of appeal are we making? Are we making a moral, you know, asking for a moral judgment here, economic, jobs, humanitarian, looking for votes? There's all sorts of incentives. A little simple equation of motivation, capacity, and intention, you know, gets to be something one could think about. In other words, what is motivating that particular person? Is he intensely religious by nature? Might be looking for some other alternatives than sort of military responses to foreign policy and that kind of thing. And the capacity that they have to do something, and then of course trying to form a shared intention here to move forward. How can we move forward together in this? And you know, and I guess unsaid would be, you know, at what point could you take the lead away from me, kind of thing, and if that interests. So that's a conversation we're having with our UN ambassador right now, trying to get them at least to think about some of these things.
Great. I'm noticing we've just got about 3 more minutes, I think, till the workshop. I know the time always flies, but Mike did have a very interesting question in the chat that I'd like to address briefly. He said, is the Peace Department too ambitious? Would it be better to start smaller with Peace Bureau or agency that is tied to the State Department diplomacy, something like how the Peace Corps is set up, or is a department needed to get a cabinet level position? And yeah, I don't know that it's needed, but it's traditionally to have a cabinet level position, you need a department to support that person, and it makes it a permanent position. That's the argument that made the most sense to me when I first came to the campaign on why a department, because then it is a permanent part of the cabinet, and it's different having that cabinet level position for conversations and dialogue. And then it does send that message that we're willing to be have peace be a priority among the other priorities of cabinet level positions. But as we've been advocating for this over the last 20 years, there have been more programs and people added to the State Department and other areas, the Justice Department. So like restorative justice and other initiatives are happening. So the government is transforming very slowly and in small places as the information that we're spreading is becoming more mainstream. But this would be the comprehensive picture for creating a sustainable peace. Some kind of significant infrastructure. And the State Department has mostly international, but the Department of Peace is 85% domestic. That we are really not rated very well in the world right now. We're a very violent country, and we need to address this domestically very seriously. So we were going to talk a little bit about the patriarchal system. There is a book called The Gender Knot, so I just want to mention it briefly because it does talk about the inherent violence in the patriarchal system, and we don't want to a lot of people think of that it means the men are a problem, but it is the name of the system, and not just necessarily men and women participate in the patriarchal system, and it doesn't serve either one of or any of the sexes. So there's a book on that can give us examples of how to address things in conversations as they come up and start to dismantle the patriarchal system one person at a time. But it's also mentioned in the bill, and a lot of different aspects of our society that need to be addressed. So in closing, I just want to remind us of being in our personal heart space. It can make a difference when we connect with our members of Congress or our organizations that we'd like to get on board and support the Department of Peacebuilding. If you aren't already on our mailing list, you can get on it by emailing Nancy, Nancy, at peacealliance.org, and we'll get you on the mailing list. We have calls every third Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. And does anybody have one burning thought, quote, or comment that they'd like to make before we close?
I just wanted to, if it's okay with you, Karen, and Kendra, put the link to the current Department of Peacebuilding bill that Representative Lee has proposed. If I can put that in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me just put the tiny URL to our page, because I don't have that handy.
Yeah, I've kind of looked through it, and it's so interesting. And in fact, the how you mentioned that there is a grant program, that's particularly interesting as well, which I feel like is a good way to bring the Department of Peacebuilding down to local level by supporting peace building programs on a local level. So it is so interesting. And I know another thing that I was kind of interested in is how I was wondering, as far as you know, does the Department of Peacebuilding advocate for economic investment in communities that are disadvantaged and underserved?
I think that would fall into that's a key portion of the root of violence. So yes, it doesn't right now advocate for any specific programs, but it's designed to look at anything that will help reduce violence. So that would fall into that category. So if there is a program out there that has been helping some communities, then it can be expanded and brought to other communities that it could help as well. Yeah. So that is definitely a possibility.
That is so interesting. And thank you guys so much for coming and for presenting at the breakout room in our Peace Summit. If anyone else has any final comments, I don't want to hog the spotlight here.
I know this is Laura. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Laura. I know we always try to end our meetings with a quote, and since we're over time, I had a really short quote if anybody wanted to hear it.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he says, "Peace is every step."